to big mainstreams in Western philosophy. So we have the purely theoretical, abstract form of philosophy that is where Descartes is basically the founder. But before him, you could argue that Plato also had a lot of characteristics that he also liked to philosophize in a more abstract way and with clear preferences to pure reason, to pure deduction, induction, abduction, to derive at conclusions with basically giving a clear priority to the rationality over emotions. On the other hand, there are other philosophers, like, for example, Aristotle. Aristotle was confronted with the same irrational behavior as Plato, but his response was different. He said, okay, well, we need to accept this irrational behavior of people and try to capture it and incorporate it into our philosophy so that we can become more effective as well as inclusive. So one of the conclusions of Plato was, for example, that democracy and leadership cannot be practiced by everyone. So not everybody should be entitled to have a vote or to be elected, because people are irrational and people come up with irrational motivations. They vote in favor of a politician because he looks good, or because his family is important, or he's an excellent athlete. But that has nothing to do with his actual qualities as a politician. So people are irrational, and therefore he concluded they should not be allowed to vote. Who can vote? And actually, more importantly, who can be voted for? Those are the philosophers. So Plato suggested that the country should be ruled by philosophers. So looking a little bit to the side towards Confucius, this is not so much different. So only people of great virtue should become leaders, and so I think that Plato and Confucius have something in common. Aristotle, on the other hand, he also observed this, and he said, well, okay, so people are not only rational human beings, they also are persuaded by other factors, and those factors are, for example, rhetoric. Rhetoric is an art to be persuasive, and it has to do with how to structure your argument, how to appeal to human emotions, how to put yourself in the shoes of your listener, and construct your story in a way that is persuasive to these people. What kind of words to use? What kind of body language is persuasive? That is basically Aristotle's writings today are still used more or less as the basic manual for public speaking.
Yeah, you are talking about Aristotle, right?
Right.
Okay, right.
But Aristotle not only wrote a basic manual for public speaking, but he also wrote a book about how to write a drama, a novel. Which elements do you need to put in to make it more make it more engaging to the audience? And that book is also still more or less the manual of how to write a play, how to write a novel. It's about plot twists. It's about how to empathize with the main character, how a twist of events will lead to a change in the fate of the main characters. So the main character is for example, everything is going well, and then through a twist of fate, everything is taken away. Maybe he loses all his money or his health, or he loses his partner, and based on that, there is a chain of events, and we are dragged into the story if we're going to construct the play in this way. And why is that? So basically, why is that important for Aristotle? Because he argued that drama is very, very important. As human beings, we have a tendency to rationalize what's happening around us, and therefore we create a kind of disengagement between the rational part and the emotional part. And he says it's very important to actually keep in touch with your emotional part to stay a balanced person. Therefore, he was so interested in rhetoric and drama. And during his time, during his days, there was actually people were subsidized to go to the theater because it would have positive health effects. They could stay in touch with their emotions and would be a more whole human being. And if you didn't have enough money, then you actually could receive money to go to the theater. So we have these two mainstreams, and I think especially the school of Aristotle is interesting because it comes very much closer to Confucianism. Confucianism is.
By the way, your room light is light switched on because I'm recording now. And also
okay.
you just
One second.
Oh yes, no, it's okay. Now it's a little bit 1 meter distance. Okay, that's much better. Not too much close to screen because I'm recording now. So you just you can see your why not try to light switch on? Right.
Yeah, maybe the light is coming from my back.
Oh really? 1 meter.
Is this better?
No, take 1 meter distance. Oh yeah, much better.
Okay.
And
no,
little
more
close. Little more close. Okay, better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And the laundry behind me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, at least this is very real. So I think there are more parallels between Aristotelian way of philosophy and Confucius than there are with Descartes and similar philosophers. So today I would like to look a little bit more about the philosophers who are more basing their theories based on empirical observation. So less about pure abstractions, pure reasoning, very typical theories about do I exist, and coming to a conclusion about your existence based on strict logic without any observation, because if you question everything, then you can question whether what you are observing around you, whether that is real or whether that is just a figment of your imagination, whether the senses that you have, for example, the sensation when you touch something, when you taste something, whether that is real or not, and whether that, when we are talking about a simple example, for example, of the color black, do I actually see the same thing as you see, or is it something that only shared by us through definition? So actually these theories in themselves are important, and it's an important stream of Western philosophy, but I would like to focus more on these empirical studies about the Aristotelian way, about more a way of how we should live our lives instead of do we exist. For that, I would like to look at the video of Alain de Botton.
Are you going to show a video?
Yes.
This
Alain
one?
de Botton. That's in the next page.
Oh, next page? No, this one, right?
No, the next one. Next one.
Oh, this one?
So, yeah. So basically, what I just said. So, Confucius is as a philosopher is very much focused on the road. How should we live? He gives very clear advice. For example, remain calm. Well, not clear, but he gives advice. Remain calm, be patient, be considerate, be brave, and he emphasizes the values, the values of morality, justice, and sincerity. And if you follow that road, if you are calm and patient, if you are considerate and brave, and you act within a moral framework, then you can become a better human being, a gentleman. And a gentleman can get followers, and if you can get followers, you can become a leader. So it starts in a very small set of things, like in your family. But by doing that, by practicing that, by becoming better at managing your family, you will become a better human being, and therefore even be capable of managing a whole country. So the philosophy of Confucius is very much based on virtues. And Western philosophy has like these two streams. I think, therefore I am, is a quote from Descartes. And it's not completely foreign to Eastern philosophy. I think there are parallels. We talked about that last Saturday. With Nishida, who also asked very existentialist question about does the moon above me exist? Is that an object, or does the moon only exist through my eyes? Does the moon exist through me? It's also a very existentialist question. So it's not that it's completely foreign in Eastern philosophy, but we're focusing on Confucius. Therefore, I think that it's good, if we want to look to parallels, to look more at the behavioral philosophers within Western philosophy. And Uno-san, would you mind clicking on the link at the bottom? It's from Alain de Botton. Alain de Botton is kind of a famous, has become kind of a famous person. I think he recorded this video. This is in a book program. He discusses 5 philosophers. Okay. And he has become rather famous. He has a very popular YouTube group. And he's a kind of a household name within modern philosophy. But this program was recorded to promote his book, in which he discusses 5 philosophers and how they are relevant to our daily lives at the moment. He's a very good speaker, very captivating, and he's actually, I learned this from Mary, who teaches philosophy in university, and she's also using his materials. I heard last Friday when I met with her. So let's have a look. It's a long video. We will not be able to finish it, but maybe 1 or 2 to give you an idea about philosophers who are relevant and how they are relevant to our lives today.
Okay. So now?
Yes, please.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague. Or a post on Facebook that all your...
Alain de Botton, the author of a new book, The Constellations of Philosophy. What do you mean by the Constellations of Philosophy?
Well, it's really alluding to a project that certain philosophers have had in the history of philosophy, by no means all, and that is the idea that philosophy can, in some way, cheer you up, make you happier, console you, that there's a practical application to philosophy. It's a minority school of thought in philosophy, because most philosophers are not interested in everyday life. And yet it seemed to me that there was a tradition of certain thinkers who were concerned, and what I set out to do in my book was to throw a spotlight on their work. They're all major philosophers, but they are often neglected in academic circles. They're not the philosophers that one could study, and so it seemed important to shine a light on them.
I should say up front that there are 6 philosophers you focus on,
yes,
in no particular order: Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Montaigne, Socrates, Epicurus, and Seneca, and we'll talk about each of them. But why did you pick these 6 as opposed to another 6?
Sure. Partly it was because I loved reading them, so it was a kind of a personal love affair going on there. Partly also because, as I said, the definition of the project was that it should be philosophers who are concerned with everyday life, and there isn't an infinite range of philosophers. I couldn't have written an essay on Kant within the context of the consolations of philosophy, it seemed to me. So, I think that they came fairly easily to mind, and what's nice about all these philosophers is that they write well, and they're very much united in the idea that it's not just what you say, but how you say it that's important. So they're a pleasure to read.
Are you a philosopher?
Probably not, because I do a lot of writing in other areas as well, and nowadays I suppose the only people who really call themselves philosophers are people on who earn all their living from doing philosophy, probably in an academic department.
Well,
though I have some loose association with an academic post, it doesn't take up enough time for me to stand up and call myself a philosopher. Although, of course, we should take advice from Socrates, who suggests that we are all philosophers and that the unexamined life is not worth living. So, to answer your question Socratically, not only am I a philosopher, but you are too, and everyone else in this room. So, yeah.
And what is philosophy?
Well, I think as conceived of by someone like Socrates, it would be very loosely defined, simply a logical way of thinking. So philosophy identifies itself not so much by its subject matter as by its method, so that it's a method of approaching questions in a logical, rational way, attempting to define terms and to move smoothly from one point to another, etc., etc. So it distinguishes itself from ordinary muddled thinking, in which we don't say what we mean, and talking rather like I'm talking now. So, to be a philosopher for someone like Socrates, it just means to make sense and to try and strive for coherence in what one's saying.
Is that what it means for all of these 6? Because it sounds like you're saying that philosophy means clear thinking.
Yes. I think all the 6 throw a different emphasis on certain things. So, for example, Seneca and the Stoic school to which he belonged, he envisaged philosophy as a discipline that's designed to assist you to cope with frustration, and it's his responsibility why we still use the word philosophical as a way to suggest that someone is taking something well, taking a disaster well. I'm being philosophical about the fact that my house was burnt down. This conception of what philosophy is dates back to the Stoic school. So you're right to say that there are differences in emphasis. Although I think all the philosophers I look at are essentially united in the idea that thinking can help in various ways. There are things you can do in your mind which are worth doing.
Comment on my experience, and that is when I was in college, generally speaking, it was the philosophy majors who were pitied as the ones who were wasting their education because upon graduation they would not be employed.
Yes. Well, I don't think the fact that they're not going to be employed is, by definition, means that their course was a waste of time. My criticism of most philosophy courses is that they do concentrate on some pretty arid subjects, and though I think there's a need to study logic and epistemology and metaphysics, I think there's also a need to study kind of ethical questions of everyday life as well, and I think that this is an area that is neglected by most philosophy departments, which is why they unfairly gain or perhaps slightly fairly gain a reputation as laughingstocks.
You are originally from where?
From Switzerland.
Is there a different approach to the teaching or even the inclusion of philosophy in schooling on the continent as opposed to the United States that you know of?
Not in Switzerland, but I do know that in France, I think when you're from 16 to 18, you are taught philosophy. I'm not sure how much of a good idea this is, because it means that a lot of French people will tell you 5 things about Descartes, which they picked up just before doing their bac. But maybe it's a start.
You've identified some of the aspects of philosophy that are relevant, and they're all listed in the, I guess it's the contents page of your book. You address unpopularity, not having enough money, frustration, inadequacy, a broken heart, and difficulties. Which came first, the philosophers in your mind to address these, or these issues to address these philosophers?
Well, what I wanted to do in my book was not so much write an introduction, a kind of general introduction to philosophy, because that seemed a task that hundreds of others have done quite well. It seemed important to me to drive one question through each philosopher's thought, so not to try and say everything about them, but to try and pick out one consoling dimension to their thought. And really, what it took was for me to read these philosophers and then ask myself, what do I think is really interesting here? What do I think really helps here? So I guess I started with a philosopher and then wound up with a conception of what it was that I felt was really at the core of their work.
Well, let's start then with Socrates, as you did. Who was he? When did he live?
Well, he lived in ancient Athens. He was we know first of all, we know not that much about him because he never wrote anything down, so what we know of him has come down to us through Plato's dialogues. Plato was a pupil of Socrates. He led a very unusual life. He never wore any sandals. It was said that he'd been born in order to spite shoemakers. He wore a dirty cloak throughout the year. It was very rare for him to have a bath. And he was a kind of an outsider figure in ancient Athens. And what he would do is to go up to important figures in the marketplace and basically ask them to explain the meaning of life. And by this, really, one has in mind the idea of someone who is asking people to explain why they're living a certain way. Why is it that they value one thing and not another? Why is it that they're taking something seriously but neglecting something else? He would go up to people and say, explain to me what virtue is, or explain what courage is, or why do you believe that making money is important, etc. And many people were very annoyed by this kind of constant provocation, this need to think about things. But it was essential to Socrates' project. And I think what one, you ask, well, what is interesting about this man? And I think he's the first person to make a distinction, which is key, between truth and opinion. He believed that there is, on one side, the truth, which is something that you've thought about rationally, logically, and have really tried to understand. And then there's opinion, which is our intuition, stuff we pick up in the marketplace. And he believed that philosophy must try to ally itself to the truth, and stand up against mere opinion. So, it's possible to say that 98% of Americans believe X, and nowadays in our own culture we think, oh, well, then X must be right. Socrates' answer would be, well, hang on, what we need to do is to try and systematically analyze what this position is, and it may be that 98% of Americans are simply wrong. So I think he lends us courage to defend certain minority opinions so long as we've thought about them properly. He lets us imagine that many of the opinions that are dominant in our culture might be wrong, or at least very muddled. And this is why he's proved a source of great inspiration to people facing opposition throughout the centuries.
What is the Socratic method?
Well, the Socratic method of thinking is really a distillation of the kind of mental maneuvers that Socrates seemed to be engaged in when he talked to Athenians in the marketplace. And really what it boils down to is an attempt to question common sense and to try and disprove it, or at least try and find exceptions to it. So, a typical thing might be, you take a common sense belief like, money will make you happy. Now, the Socratic method would be to take that statement and think, well, okay, can I show any exceptions to this statement? Is this statement really true? Or are there certain situations where that statement will not be true? And one could say, yes, if you've got no friends, but you've got a lot of money, you're unlikely to be very happy. So already there's a kind of, not necessarily that statement is wrong, but there's an imprecision. And the Socratic method is an attempt to refine rather baggy, loose, imprecise definitions that are bandied about in common sense conversations. So try and sharpen them by trying to find exceptions to them. It may sound like a relatively tedious process. In a way,
yes,
it's common sense, but it's common sense made explicit.
Go ahead.
So that actually, we were talking last Saturday about a big difference between Western and Eastern society, or actually Japanese society, about basically in Japanese society there is this tendency to read air and to leave a lot of things unchallenged, not even discuss about them, because we have a common understanding. That's implicitly assumed we have common understanding. So this goes 180 degrees against what Socrates was teaching. Socrates actually made his major point was actually to challenge everything that was unquestioned and question everything, even though it seems that there was a very wide support in favor of certain ideas. He wanted to challenge them. His slogan was, "A life unexamined is a life not worth living." So he actually focused very much on finding the truth, of really questioning and really challenging people and challenging common beliefs in order to get a deeper understanding. And I think this method and this philosophy is one of the cornerstones of Western society, especially in a country like the Netherlands, where we question everything and we put everything out in the open in order to get closer to the truth, or at least not to leave it out there, but to make sure, okay, what is your understanding about this topic, and what is my understanding, and are we in agreement or are we in disagreement about this? And if we are, what are the next steps that we should take in order to deal with this difference in understanding, or what are the consequences of our belief? So it's basically constantly trying to uncover unclarities, and then actually defining actions that need to be taken in order to change the situation, which is very different from the Japanese way. So this is definitely a source of cultural misunderstanding between Japanese people in general and Western people.
It's very interesting. I've never thinking about that. He is Socrates, right? Socrates is. I mean, 2,500 years ago, they are thinking like the basis of current European people's mindset. And Japanese is always believe that the news and information they got, and they do not have any discussion of any kind. But European people, everything they're going to start have a question and skeptical for any kind of information. Actually, current America, they have a lot of fake news, and sort of things is prevailing in the world. Also, I'm accessing a lot of YouTube. Some YouTube telling a lie might be. So every time need to check this is right information or wrong information. We need to make judgment. But Japanese people, they never do that because of kind of custom we don't have. But what you said today, I never experienced European people have the kind of basis 2,500 years ago. I thought, let's see, current information prevailing in the rest of the world, many kind of information. Some is fake, some is right, some is vague and skeptical, a lot of information. That's the reason why European people try to doubt those information. But actually, this kind of basic idea sort is started 2,500 years ago. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the roots are in lie within the theories of Socrates. So that's basically also defines the start of philosophy.
I see. This
so that.
And in the book, in this interview, he said, the interviewer said, if you're going to major in philosophy, they can get the chance to get business. But actually, this is completely wrong. Recently, in Japan, also, Teijin company's founder told that you should study philosophy rather than finance and accounting and so forth. This is very important for try to train your perspective and insight. So this is a very big issue to study philosophy, right?
You're right, but actually, I think in reality there are very few HR departments, both in Japan and in the rest of the world, who would actually prefer somebody who has a philosophy degree over somebody who has, let's say, a degree in information technology.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think we're all in agreement that it's very important, but in reality, I think that people who have a degree in philosophy have a very hard time. But what he's also saying, and I think that is true, not everything in life is measurable through money. It's actually to have a moral compass, to understand virtues, and to actually become wiser through studying philosophy. Actually will make us much bigger human beings, and therefore they have value. But I would not recommend people to only study philosophy without any content. It's just like that. It's also with critical thinking, right? You can study a lot about critical thinking. There are techniques, there are all kinds of fallacies that we should be aware of, but without contents, it doesn't mean much. So when the push comes to shove, you need to be knowledgeable in the field where you are arguing. Therefore, there are techniques, and there is content, and these things should go hand in hand. Therefore, maybe philosophy is very good, but it doesn't go well without any knowledge about accounting if you want to become an accountant. However, without philosophy, accountants can become merely machines and not be very good as human beings, and they could generate all kinds of other frictions. So I think in general, in an approach of liberal arts, not completely focusing on practical skills that generate the highest revenue in terms of money, but more of an approach towards how do I become a better human being, and how can I be of value to the people around me who come from all kinds of different angles and directions with all kinds of different backgrounds. How can I navigate that? The latter is a much more interesting, more all-round way approach that will enable you to be much better at engaging with other people, expand your network, and therefore gain influence.
Exactly. Just my explanation is wrong. Okay, the Teijin founder said you should study philosopher. You should study philosopher, not only studying accounting and finance, not only, but also. And also somebody told me philosophy are currently belonging to, one of the liberal arts and belonging to the cultural department in the university. Somebody said this is wrong. This should be belonging to science department, not culture.
Right.
Okay, it's completely different from French novel, French culture, French literature, and this is philosophy is completely different from those of kind of cultural issues. This is much more concerned about, liberal art itself is concerned about science. So this philosophy should be belonging to science department instead of culture.
Right.
So currently, if you graduate culture department, and especially you majored in philosophy, you can, company will not hire you instead of ICT or AI and robotics. But recently, Japanese universities, some of those recognize they need to study liberal arts, including philosophy. This is very important, not only studying physics and chemical, but also they should study liberal arts. So this is a recent new tendency, but not major, but minority. But this, I believe, everybody should study liberal arts. So currently they do not. And also we should study Western philosophy, but also Eastern philosophy, both of those.
Right.
Thinking approach is very different. Especially this morning, you showed the video, and Socrates explained, okay, we need to doubt and think and discuss, debate. Sort of things is, I didn't know that you had 2,500 years ago. I thought this is recent, or European cultural issue. But actually, in the history, they studied a lot about those kind of issues. Right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. These are the roots of Western culture, this philosophy. Of course, it's not the only roots. We also have religion and other influences. But this is a big major pillar under Western society. So Socrates, the Socratic method, the urge to find the truth, to question the world around us, to question beliefs, are a fundamental driver of Western society.
Right. By the way, I studied Eckhart Tolle yesterday, and I understand your video shown, and it takes several hours, but I finally understand. Okay.
Okay.
This is the other.
Yeah. If you're interested, I have his book, I believe, so I can bring it to you if you want to read it.
No, thank you. I understand.
Okay.
I understood.
You're busy enough.
I am very busy. I don't have a time to read book.
Right.
Yeah. Terribly busy.
Okay. So the interview is I don't know if you like it so far, but I think it's super good. The interviewer is very good, and the interviewee is excellent. So the approach that he chooses for this program is not to just simply discuss philosophers and their theories, but he changes it around. So he's asking moral questions, and then answers these moral questions, these ethical problems, from the perspective of different philosophers. So it gives you a much better toolkit, or that where you can pick your different instruments and from different philosophers to deal with the everyday lives, the everyday life. So that is, I think it's a good approach. It's also the approach for his YouTube channel, School of Life, where he's dealing with all kinds of challenges that you have or may have as a human being, making it very practical, but with a solid basis in philosophy. So yeah, I really enjoyed watching this.
Oh, did you see all of those?
Yes.
Oh, really? This is more than 1 hour.
Yeah, but it's fascinating, and yeah, I liked it a lot.
Are you going to explain, or are you going to show continue?
Yeah, well, he does a very good job explaining himself, but I think we will have several times in the video when we need to stop and make parallels with what we have studied before, or what we have seen before, and put things into context, or when there is a definite parallel with Confucius or other philosophers, so that we can keep the story going instead of just watching the video.
Yeah, as you know, that I'm teaching Spirits of Japan, actually the Confucianism, every Saturday morning, 2 or 3 hours. But it will take 1 year. And finish 1 year, again the same, I'm going to teach it again, because I can find a new thinking approach, thinking way, or some concept. So it takes a long time. The Western philosophy is the same. So not easy to understand. This is not knowledge. This is wisdom. Right?
So what I'm aiming to do is maybe not stay with Western philosophy for
exactly. I agree.
for you.
I agree with you. I ask you to continue this kind of philosophy more longer, because 100% for sure, none of those cannot join this course. They don't want to join. Too difficult. Eckhart Tolle. Okay, just I viewed this video several times, not once or twice. It's very, sort of things. Everything is so sophisticated. So
right.
If you're going to continue philosophy every week, none of people can join this course. And especially
even Takahashi-san might.
Yeah, no newcomer, but still he's enjoying. How come he's quite?
Yeah.
He's quite excited. He told me that.
No. His flight is almost right. 8:30. Yeah, right. Yeah, he's still there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, but
yeah.
I'm
Thank you, Takai-san.
I'm thinking about okay, we don't going to get into detail about. I think you are not so much familiar with philosophy itself, right? And
No.
so my concern is what I'm going to do next.
So basically, I want to kind of take that philosophy and bring it to the next step. Bring it back to global leadership, which is the theme of your school. And make up. Takashi-san is now.
Here.
So he's signing off because he's getting on board. So he's so basically, I was thinking of extending philosophy and moving into persuasion and critical thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. Yuva, you wanted to say something, is that correct?
Yeah, it is actually very difficult for me to understand regarding the philosophy, and also the video just now you showed me, right? Alain de Botton, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the video is, but yeah. Also, mind you, we have also already been talking about this topic for quite a few weeks. So it's also a very short and quick recap of a lot of information. So don't feel bad if you don't get it all together. Basically, we are looking at this because it will give us a much better understanding as to why there are such big differences and why do differences exist between Western and Eastern philosophies and what they are, to better understand why people think the way that they do think based on their cultural background. And once you know why, it's also easier to see ways of improving or making people aware of their cultural framework, of their philosophy, and that will enable us to define concrete steps to actually bridge gaps between people in Japan and people outside of Japan. So that's the idea. Philosophers in themselves, they tell us a little bit of why we think what we are thinking, why do we respond the way that we respond in daily life. Now, after we complete, we get a better understanding of our background. We will try to focus on critical thinking skills and argumentation with these philosophers in mind. So it will hopefully will become very much more practical in how we can build bridges between Japan and the rest of the world, which is the objective.
Just exactly.
Of
This is very important. philosophy is focused on human being, right? And Japanese people is kind of huge village, and they don't make discussion and debate because cultural fundamental base is very broad, and with that word they understand each other. Sort of area, they have huge area, but not Japanese people, but going outside Asian people, their cultural background, religious background, and they have also multicultural, multi-religious environment they have. So they more need to talk, need to discuss. Otherwise, they cannot. Very difficult to understand each other. This is the fundamental base for any kind of business, right? Business itself. Okay, you are experienced expert for accounting or marketing and sales and something else, or manufacturing whatsoever, but you should to know about negotiation skill and communication skill is very important, right? So sort of issues much more emphasized on rest of the world rather than only Japanese people. So this is my understanding, right?
Right.
That's the reason philosophy is very important. So you said global management skill or some communication skill is basically based upon philosophy, Western philosophy, just like Socrates.
Right. So basically, what it boils down to, we have this is kind of like a fundamental layer, just like religion, history, philosophy. These are drivers that form and shape the way that we think, the way that we act. So the awareness of that is very important. And the next step is to actually, okay, how do you use that knowledge in order to become more persuasive? But persuasiveness is just one element, because actually, if you take that further, is that how do you build up trust relationships with people who are not member of your own culture? That is the basis of business, I think. So the foundational layer, philosophy and religion, our backgrounds. Then the practical layer, how can we apply that and there's this awareness of differences between this fundamental layer, and applied it to become persuasive to other people from different cultures. But persuasiveness is just a matter of building relationships, because we can ignore everything and try to be persuasive and engage in win-lose negotiation, but that will not build long-term relationships, which is especially ineffective when, for example, dealing with Chinese where relationships mean a lot, and trust is the beginning of a lifetime commitment from both sides. So it's not that being persuasive, being having a good and effective way of negotiating with this other side is not a matter of winning and losing, but it's more a matter of, okay, how do I build up a relationship with somebody from a different culture?
Yeah, this point that's the reason I discussed Saturday, difference between Japanese and Western culture, and additionally, Confucianism discussed about actually how do you going to listen to the other people's opinion or hear your wife's opinion, so forth. And they usually, you have your own idea, your thought. So you, before hearing the other people's opinion, you reject it. Sort of in the process, we need to consider for deeper thinking. Actually, are you going to hear your wife's opinion, or how are you going to judge good and bad, or this kind of morality? And this is morality is different by person, not only the Westerners or Japanese. So personal differences they have. So you need to recognize how different each by person, everybody be different. Is this a good thing or this a bad thing? And last Saturday I told you many portions of in the world you're thinking this is bad thing, so you never touch it, and everybody never touch it. But actually, this is very gray area. So we need to consider more clarify. This is bad or good, or depending on the person by person, how we're going to decide and judge. So we need to go into experience, like kind of good example is love affairs. In American president and French president, Japanese president, they're going to have some love affairs. What's going to happen? 3 countries, big difference, And French president, if they're going to have love affairs, and media asked them, he said, no, it is my private issue. Then they stop discussing. But in the United States, usually, if Obama did love affairs, big problem. But Trump has a problem, did that kind of affairs, no problem. So America is more individualistic, right? It happened in Japan, and prime minister should quit. So this kind of good or bad decision is different. And one example, Trump, he is actually villain and a wicked person, right? But they going to still he sit on the position of a president. This never happened in Japan. Never happened. Like yesterday, do you know that he's racial, criticism, but nobody against him. It's never. I can't believe it. This kind of bad mouth. Oh my God, his morality, no morality. Why he going to sit on the position of president in Japan? Nobody allowed him to do that, right? So this is the big difference, and not only also this is by country, but this is cases by person. We have big difference for the judgment, for the morality judgment, or religious judgment. Like as you know, I'm studying global democracy. Then I get to know Islamic country, not in Malaysia, not in Indonesia, but if you go into the Saudi Arabia, this is crazy. This is their Wahhabi is very same as ISIS. It's crazy. No democracy. Are they considered democracy? No kidding. They have nothing acceptance for the human rights. So this is ridiculous. Lots of things happen by person. Then you're going to judge. We're going to proceed the contract, to proceed to communication, negotiation, so forth. This is, I think, before discussing Western or Japanese, we need to consider for those solve issues in deeper thought. Like, for example, good example, your wife is Japanese, but never discuss kind of those area, even if you were acquainted with her more than 20 years ago, so forth. Never talk about that, but we need to recognize kind of issue. Otherwise, we cannot get deeper thought, okay, and more better skill to understand the human being. Okay.
But there's also then the question of how to do that, like the Socratic method. As we know, Socrates actually was killed ultimately. He was sentenced to death because he seriously annoyed people around him by asking these questions and questioning them on a level that they were very uncomfortable with. So he was accused of antagonizing the youth of Athens and sentenced to death. How is that in Japan, for example? Is there?
By the way, he sentenced to death because of he said negative for election. No.
No, basically his questioning, the way that he questioned people, the way that he exposed the flaws in their reasoning and the flaws in their ideas, made people very uncomfortable. So they were angry with him, and they tried to eliminate him because he was influential to like a lot of very talented and people like Plato, for example.
Yeah, his true reason. The sentence was he rejected for the election itself. Election
Well, but I don't
is,
think that is why he was sentenced to death. I think basically people were touched in their ego because their firm held beliefs were questioned in a way that they felt he had no place in questioning. It was not up to him, this dirty man who didn't wear sandals, who was a nobody, was questioning them in a way that was unacceptable. Now, Japan comes a little bit to mind. Kuki yominai, you cannot read the air. That basically means that you are asking questions that should not be asked, or saying things that should not be said at that moment because it may be uncomfortable or unpleasant or what have you for the other people. So the question is, okay, Japan should do is and make this more clear and be more dig deeper in finding the truth and finding value in certain things and question the way that we are doing things. But is there actually a culture in Japan that tolerates this way of questioning, of challenging common sense and established ideas?
It's kind of the culture of humiliation. Okay, if you're going to ask this question and humiliate, okay, the counterpart person, so they try to confirm what they are thinking, what does she thinking, and try to hesitate to ask him.
Right.
This is the culture of Japanese culture. It's a soldier's culture. Hesitate, okay, humiliate.
Right.
This is
people feel humiliated. Yeah.
This is one of the major concerns. Japanese people very. I even know that Japanese people very difficult to what they're thinking now. Okay, and very difficult to judge. Right. So you can ask him. You can ask him, but reluctant to ask him. He might not be the true answer, what he has in his mind. Okay? Maybe different answer.
Or he might feel uncomfortable with the question and reject it without answering the question, and the relationship might be destroyed or
no, different. Okay, you were going to ask the question for Kimoto. Kimoto sometimes never answer the true answer what he saw because he is thinking about your culture. He is thinking about your religion. He is thinking about your thinking background. He just measure he himself. So like Dutch people speak straight. He does not concern about your culture, environment, whatever. Okay, I think like this, right? Japanese never speak out the truth, what he's thinking. Very dangerous in Japanese society, right? Japanese is unification, group. So every time consider for group opinion. So if you're going to ask me, but I'm belonging to some society, some organization, I can speak out my thought, my thinking, because it's very risky. If kind of my answer, interviewee ask me to interview, viewer asking interviewee, I cannot tell the truth, right? Very, sophisticated issue. Not only maybe.
If please continue.
Okay, this is like if I'm going to do, like Takashi Gon already go. If I'm going to doing business Vietnamese. And this case is I'm a company try to doing business Vietnamese company or government, but I cannot tell the truth what I'm thinking about because I'm belonging to Japanese industrial relations something of association organization. Okay, my company speak a kind of contract with that Vietnamese company. They try to criticize me. Why are you doing that kind of contract? Why? How do you think about Japanese quality, right? Quality of product. No, I don't care because their quality is more lower than Japan. But Japanese association, they try to strictly keep your level of quality of Japanese industry quality. They force me to do that. So I cannot speak out the truth. This is one example. So and why Japanese government, Japanese company tries to force Vietnamese government, company try strictly adopt most advanced technology? Why they try to sell? They, by company, they understand they need to sell more, lower grade, lower quality, because they cannot pay for us. So instead, which company will going to take that job? Is China, Australian company that are going to pick it up? Because they are independent. Japanese companies, they are not independent. They are very vague, so like atmosphere of organization. They cannot do that. They are individual company can speak out, make contract, and so forth. Can do that. This is background. So then now is coming to the individual thinking, and also always he is thinking about your side, and my side, your side. So this sort of thing is a big obstacle to in the doing business, doing communication with Asian people, right? So this is very difficult to change. I was belonging to American company, so I don't have kind of mind. So beforehand, many people criticized me. You don't think about, like you said, Cookie Omena, sort of, I need to consider for the atmosphere of this society, environment, and team, and sort of things. But this, I think, we don't need to think about that. If I'm going to speak at wrong opinion, but the counterpart person says something, right? But Japanese people, they don't say anything. Just only the wrong against opinion accumulating, finally kick you out.
Exactly. Exactly. So they vote with their feet. But in that way, if you don't make it a topic of discussion, if you cannot put it out in the open like you can do in Western society, in generally speaking, it might be hurtful, but everybody understands that if done well, if done with integrity, questioning certain beliefs is a way of actually coming closer to the truth. So if done with the right intentions, it's not only appreciated, it's respected to actually challenge the ideas of others. But in Japan, that seems to be much more difficult, and people prefer not to discuss it, leave it untouched. So what happens is that in a culture like that, it's always basically the majority opinion that drives behavior. And I think Steve Jobs once said that if you ask people what they want the same thing that they already have, and then they want it at a lower price with higher specs. That's what they want. So if you want to bring change, if you really want to improve things, you need people who are actually thinking outside the box and are willing to stick to that and defend their ideas and opinions and thereby create progress. If everybody is always confirming to the majority opinion, change will never occur, because we will always we always think within the current framework. So it's within that culture, it's very difficult to create change, I think.
Yeah, I tell you, I was belonging in a certain level of position of Japanese organization, official organization. I was a certain level of position I had, and I talk straight, and I speak out what I'm thinking. But this organization rejected me, and the top position person, he told me he hated me. He said to me, "Why?" But he just thinking about, you should not talking about kind of issue on this organization. But you know, so, but he already passed away. But that guy is, all the way he hated me because I talked straight. But Japanese organization never like that. Superior man and subordinate, and the sort of chaining relationship and deep organization. everybody follow on the top people, and they some code of conduct, ethical standard. Oh, Sunny Beach, But you should open, but you cannot do that. So this is a very big cultural obstacle. Japanese company, Japanese people, if he has position, if he has position belonging to Japanese society organization, he cannot do what he think, what he thought. Some people is more Americanized. He just only get out of this organization. He's okay. He can do everything. But majority of people, he belongs to Japanese village society and so forth. So they cannot speak out what he think. This is a big obstacle for Japan, but it cannot be changed. But that's the reason why I'm talking about globalized Japanese people out of how many? 130 million people. 500,000 people might go outside of Japanese society organization. Okay, you can do it for as a globalized attitude. I every time told to Takahashi and Kimoto, you should be more globalized. You don't concern about Japanese organization, but problem occurs because if you don't belong into Japanese organization, if you don't accept with your boss, and you are not going to be fired, but you cannot take that position. This is the problem. So Japanese have two obstacles: how to persuade your customer, but also how to persuade your boss. Right? So if you're going to sit in on the Hanoi and doing business with Vietnamese government, but also she needs always consider for Japanese headquarters thinking. Japanese headquarters thinking is that this is sort of thing what I'm saying. Not easy. Okay. I tried doing like that, but I try to sell this kind of level of quality product, but headquarters always reject his opinion. And so she just very difficult situation. Okay, we're going to force them to do that. We cannot get job, right? So this is the current Japanese companies have difficulty to spread their knowledge, their skill, their product global level. European people, they're going to ask the Japanese company. They want the kind of product, they want the kind of spec, so forth. But Japanese cases, majority Japanese company cannot follow them. Because Japanese organization, industrialized spec or code of conduct and ethical standard prohibit to doing that. This you cannot see it, but not the kind of see. You cannot see that. But this is a Japanese unique culture. Only Japan, I think only Japan. Only Japan is kind of sort of culture they have. British. One reason is we have 2600 history of emperor's family, and they just living on the island. None of people invaded Japan, so no blood mixing, and they just before World War II they have dignity and pride. They had not anymore now, but they believe the best people in the world. They thought beforehand, and so they try to make an effort and doing the best of best. This is the culture still remains, and also additionally they have Confucianism concept is still remaining. Some of those, not all of those, but some of those. Because what is he just should belong into his company instead of doing business with the foreigners. He should stick to his company and his boss. But not wife, not family, but company belonging to company. Absolutely, she should obey to the company. This is stupid, I think, but I won't change it. But that's the reason I wrote book, right? Confucius never says that. But very difficult to change Japanese culture. And I wrote book, Japanese book, and you should much more focus on family or your wife rather than company. And I tried to sell this book to the company, but any kind of president denied. Oh, son of a bitch, why family? Why we should understand why? You should understand my company, right? This is wrong. But they every company, they never understand. So I have 4,000 books in my stock, but I can sell it. It's so stupid, you know. Then I do another book, Spirits of Japan. Still, I can sell it, but they use just
I think you're selling it to the wrong people. You should be selling it to company presidents. You should be selling it to wives of corporate executives.
Okay, this is good question. Because Japanese company is very hierarchy structure. Okay, president denied, everybody can say yes. Okay, and also especially human resource training program director or general manager, he is directly connecting to the president. So I distribute my book and the sort of people, they cannot accept me. This is, you know, my wife told me, okay, you should write a book, company like it. But I told her, I can't do that, you know, this is, oh my God, you know, this is, that's the reason I won't change Japanese society. The fundamental Japanese culture, I want to change it. Okay? For example, Kimoto can speak at whatever he wants, to speak out to everybody in the rest of the world, and better communication, doing good business. But many cases he cannot, because of culture. Right? Or most of the problem is Takashi is currently sticking to the business in Hanoi today and meeting his government with the Vietnamese, but he has always problems. And he just got, most problem is communication with headquarters, not the local people. Right?
Right. So if you're saying that Japanese society should westernize, or basically it's enough that 500,000 Japanese will lead the way to globalize Japan, that's going to be a very difficult road for these 500,000 people if the rest of society doesn't follow suit. If the rest of society is not globalizing as well, maybe not at the same speed, but I think there is a general need for everybody to globalize and start embracing the idea that we are not
impossible. Okay, even if he just graduated American university, European university, he cannot do that. Okay, so what I'm focused on, 500,000 people, he should study and global people negotiation, communication, but also with local people negotiation. Both sides, he can get skill and understand and the gap of those, you know, bridging those people. Those kind of people 500,000. Okay, if I'm an American, more easy. Okay, I can doing business with European people, just simple. I don't thinking about headquarters, what they're thinking about. Okay, I did this job, I saw this qualified job, that's all. But Japanese case is cannot do that. Also, the European people negotiation, but also headquarters people negotiation. Double work, we should do that. This is our,
right.
This is 500,000. 130 million is impossible. Okay, can they speak English? No, 100 years later, still they cannot. Okay, if going to current situation, next 10 years, 20 years, Japanese want to go into waging war against some country because local people do not understand, like your country people do not understand Russian people, so they're going to start waging war. This is Japanese history. We told that. We studied that. So this is my mindset. It's not easy, but there are many people, Japanese people can start to study English. No kidding, even if I make an effort for after finishing Accenture and 13, 14 years I study English, and also 4 years I just discuss with you every week. But still I have a lot of difficulty to understand Western and European people, as you know, right? But ordinary people can, okay, just like Uniqlo or Rakuten, they decided to start to speak English and every employee. No, they cannot. Superficially.
The first step. Yeah. It's the first step. It's a starting point because, like the capacity to actually communicate with each other is one thing, but the capacity to communicate doesn't make you an effective communicator. So the next step is to understand cultural differences, backgrounds, philosophy, history, and everything else. So it's really like a transportation layer. In terms of IT, it's the network, but it's not the computer, and it's certainly not the software when you are learning English. It's just the basic layer that you need in order to communicate from one computer to the next. But you need the hardware and you need the software as well. Otherwise, you will not be able to be effective communicators.
I understand. I don't deny you. Okay, I don't deny you. But I worked with American company more than 30 years. And first of all, you're going to start to study English and start to communicate in English. But 30 years passed, nothing improved, progress in the next step. Okay, just only the communicate English. That even for 30 years, and just only communicate using English, but not more than that. None of improvement for the culture understanding, religious understand. Even it's big gap. Okay, I tell you, big gap. Language, and you're going to communicate with your Dutch people, the culture, big gap. Okay, study English. Okay, is part of total understanding your culture. I think less than 10%. 90% is Dutch history, Dutch culture. What you're thinking. It's very difficult, even if you're going to make an effort. And I discussed with you debate with you for 4 years, but still, I this morning I didn't know that Socrates has kind of sort of idea 2,500 years. It is fundamental of current European culture, but I didn't know that. The sort of thing I find every time many issues. This I think actually your wife is Japanese, but you never discuss with your wife, even she's you try to whole day living with you, but because usually we don't have a chance to discuss at a deeper insight. Okay, and just daily life, okay, just daily life, you don't need to communicate more deeper side. So what I'm trying to do that I try to discuss with you more deeper side. Okay? I want to touch in deeper side. So mutual understanding. Then I'm going to let the other people. That's the reason I'm going to start YouTube. Okay, we try to give them information. I have to write a book, and we're going to share. Not good enough. This is not good enough. But I tried to reach to the Negro people. This is not enough currently your situation. But they never understand what I saw. Not easy. Okay. Looks like that's okay. I study English. It's good enough to understand American people, European people. No kidding. Right? I have communication with American people before, but not easy. By the way, okay, time is up right today.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock, and I need to go to a meeting at 10 o'clock, so I need to get moving. Thank you very much for today. Thank you for joining, Yuva.
So what are you going to do this Saturday?
Alain de Botton.
Oh, continue. Okay, good. Okay. So
yeah, so that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Okay, thank you. Yuva, thank you very much for joining today, okay?
Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Okay. Good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.